And there I stood, just wishing for the world to end.
Hello and welcome to this spoiler-free review of Zanki Zero, Last Beginning. My name is David Lloyd and with me today is Jordan Rudick, and let's get right into the introduction.
So Zanki Zero comes to us from Spike Chunsoft, and it's not in a game in the Danganronpa series that was on Vita and I think eventually came to PS4, but it's very similar. It's a survival kind of dungeon RPG. The main idea is that you've got these 8 characters who turn out to be clones, and they've kind of been left behind or stranded on an island of this post-apocalyptic Earth. You know, the world's been destroyed. There's these floating islands. You're on one of them. So you're trying to survive. You're trying to figure out what happened. The characters don't have all their memories. They also had one of the interesting kind of works into the gameplay here as well is that all of the clones that you meet or play as, they only have 13 days before they die, but they can be reborn if they die. You can use this machine to bring them back to life. Each clone is a character that you play as, and they all have their different kind of story beats, and you learn a little bit about their past when you take on each character to play as. But the way it plays out is that the island kind of attaches to or finds floating islands that adjoin it, and these are dungeons that you explore. And each dungeon has kind of a theme to it, whether that's a jungle or a hospital or kind of a department store kind of place. And then one character will kind of learn about their history by going through that dungeon. It's a pretty interesting game. Maybe David will get a little bit more into the story if that sounds like a good plan for you.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, because it's the way it plays out is it's kind of like an adventure novel. Like there's a visual novel kind of intertwined with all of the different dungeon crawling and survival tactics. And the story was the draw. I do enjoy the dungeon crawling and the RPG part, and the survival portion was interesting mechanics as well. But what kept me coming back for the pretty long gameplay, like 40-ish hours or so, I think we ended up putting in. It was the visual novel. The story was the enticing part for me.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I found it really compelling. I wanted to see what was going to happen to these characters. I found a lot of them charming, especially Sho and Mirai, who we'll talk about later. I think the story for Spike Chunsoft games like this one, like Danganronpa, the story is that draw. You want to see, who's going to survive, who's going to make it to the end, what's going to be the final outcome. These games generally have like a very not depressing, but like a dark tone to them. They're not happy-go-lucky. Zanki Zero kind of breaks that mold a little bit. It seems to have this funny balance between happy story beats and sad ones. Dark or maybe taboo kind of subjects come up as well, and yeah, it's kind of an interesting hodgepodge of different tones and themes. I was really happy to get to the end of the story. I think the resolution was pretty good. What about the gameplay, David? What did you think about the survival aspects, the dungeon crawling, and then anything you had to do gameplay-wise?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. So the dungeon crawling felt like the examples I've had in my past were kind of the Shin Megami Tensei, where the dungeon is a grid map, and so you move one square at a time. So I like the structure of the grid and being able to see where everything is, and you can see where you've been and where you need to go. The survival portion, like one of the things I found about the game is that there's never a time. It always tries to keep you off your guard, uncomfortable, I guess would be the best way to put it. Whether it's enemies at every turn in the dungeon, or if it's like some of the comedy or some of the themes that go around in the dungeons, they're like you said, they're taboo subjects for a lot of the backstory. So it's always like this uncomfortable feeling, like with a lot of the backstory, like you said, it's a lot of dark backstory, and the characters go through their histories are very depressing. Like, they've went through very traumatic experiences, and so when you watch the traumatic experiences play out, like, you could feel it in the pit of your stomach. It's that feeling of like, oh my god, like this has happened to these people. It's bad. It's very heartbreaking, and the way that the novel takes place is like while you're going through the dungeon, you're getting it piece by piece, so there's a very paced amount of story that you're getting, so there's never really a long stretch of time where you're not getting a story, so you're always left with that. They're always trying to keep you in that kind of uncomfortable feeling of always being at kind of heightened attention, and just to keep you kind of the nerves always tense, I guess would be the way to put it.
I think uncomfort, or this sense of discomfort, is absolutely right. The story is already meant to make you feel uncomfortable, and then the dungeons do that as well. Enemies can sometimes pop out of nowhere, or sometimes you can just hear them. There's these zombie-like creatures, and they're kind of moaning, or these animals like goats or pigs or other kind of darker creatures that you find, and they make sounds. You know they're there, but you don't know exactly where they are, right? Because it's a first-person kind of corridor game like that. But yeah, the way the dungeons play out, that gameplay, I think mixes really well with the story, and I think you're absolutely right. This sense of discomfort kind of pervades the whole game. You're not meant to feel happy or that you're safe at various points. Another thing we were neglecting a little bit is that survival aspect. And when you're out in the dungeons, you have to be concerned about your character's stress levels, their stamina, their health. There's a lot of meters that you're watching out for. As you're walking around, your stamina meter goes down, so you have to feed your characters, or feed people in your party. If you feed them, then they also have to use the bathroom eventually, so you got to make sure that you find a washroom in time. Of course, you're worrying about your health as well. So I think that whenever you're going through the dungeons, you're never feeling like, oh, I've gotten to this room, I'm safe now. There's always something ticking down, or always something to worry about. So the gameplay does make you feel very tense. It's definitely not a game, at least on the normal difficulty, a game for people who are maybe a little bit faint-hearted or want something more comfortable,
or easily offended.
Yeah, all that. Yeah, that's for sure too. I really enjoy the gameplay. I think the dungeon crawling is fun. I think there's a lot of puzzles to it as well, so if you're into that kind of thing. It reminds me a little bit of Etrian Odyssey in the dungeon crawling and exploration. Of course, there's switches, there's traps you have to avoid as well. I found it pretty fun, although about halfway through, or maybe with 2/3 of the way through the game, it does get a little repetitive. You're going through longer dungeons, and maybe you need to find different keys or go to different floors and backtrack a lot, and I think that does start to wear on you as you progress through the game. So that was one thing I did notice, that I was starting to lose interest in a little bit. What about, did you have anything else about gameplay, David, you want to go for?
The other part that for the survival is that so there is some base building aspects to it, where you can build up your base with items that you find out in the wild, and again, they really know how to keep the pace consistent, because you can't just grind your base. Like, you can't grind for items to build your base to be overpowered, because a lot of the upgrades, the way to upgrade your base, are unique items that are not. They've been placed in specific places by the developers, so it's not like you can find these items and max out your levels early on in the game. Like, they really keep you, like, they never want you to, like you said, there's no point where you actually feel safe. Like, they're always finding ways to throw you off, or to keep you from becoming too powerful, and I think that works well in keeping everything, keeping that feeling going through the whole time, and then keeping the pace that consistent throughout.
Yeah, you remind me something else about the survival aspect, and that's the fact that you can't get overpowered, you can't get overly strong, so you are constantly worrying about the creatures you encounter. Like, when I was fighting people, especially the bosses, like, sometimes they would kill you in 1 or 2 hits. You had to be very careful about the combat. It's kind of an action-based combat. It's certainly not turn-based. You encounter an enemy in your field of vision, and you have to go and just hit them physically with a weapon that you might have equipped, or swords, or saws, knives, things like that. And you might not do a lot of damage necessarily, so the combat can drag on a little bit. You do have to stay on your toes, especially against the bosses. They're pretty challenging to have different attack patterns and stuff like that. Yeah, I think the base building, I really like that part as well. I did feel like you were kind of building it up throughout the story, and maybe every chapter you would make your base a little bit bigger. You'd be able to build new things or cook new meals to increase your stamina or to fulfill your stamina bar. Yeah, I did like that part of the game. What about the presentation? Just the way it looks, sound. What do you think about the music and stuff like that?
I really loved the visuals. Like, everything was bright and beautiful, like especially when you're in your main island where it's kind of like a desert island. So like the sky looks beautiful, and the colors of the characters, like they have a unique look to each character, and they all kind of have like their own color patterns, and so everything looks very well visually. The audio was fine. I didn't like the music was good. The music would change with the emotions of the time.
Yeah.
So when there was obvious points where you were supposed to be, like when the characters were stressed or when they were arguing or something like that, the music would turn to a somber. It would turn, like, it could speed up or it could slow down, but you could tell the feeling of the moment by the music. So I thought it did well there. There was a few neat things, like I believe the arcade machine on the garage on island was playing like Beethoven's Last Symphony.
Yeah, that might be right. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was kind of neat to kind of hear it in a MIDI type like changing. So I thought the artistic value of the game was very well done.
Mm-hmm. I liked how in the main screen, when you're exploring around or going anywhere, you can always change the music to whatever you want it to be. So your traveling music, you might be in the dungeon and the default might be ominous, but you could change it to something really happy and upbeat if you didn't want to keep listening to that kind of depressing music while you were exploring the dungeons. So it was nice to have that flexibility. I thought it was a little bit schizophrenic sometimes, the music, how you'd be in a conversation, it'd be really ominous and dark and dour, and then about halfway through the conversation it'd be all light and upbeat and really positive and stuff like that. And I thought it did those kind of changes really often, and then I found them jarring. I was okay. Like, I know I'm supposed to be upset about or stressed about what's happening right now, and then they switch to the happy music again. Oh, everyone's friends again, or let's go back to exploring and everything's good. I thought that there were some weird shifts like that. I think the game. Maybe it's just part of the personality of the game. I found them a little bit. They stuck out to me. Maybe not a great thing.
Yeah, I think it was a personality thing because it seemed like those moments were like dark comedy where,
sure,
like you said, there'd be like this tense moment, and then somebody would like break the tension with an inappropriate comment, and then it kind of turned goofy at times. But it seemed like that was more of the personality of the writer coming out with the. It reminds me kind of like the Cable Guy in a sense of. Where it's kind of goofy, but in a kind of horror setting in a sense. Sure. It's like the setting is dark, but then it's like you get these breaks of like jokes, like inappropriate jokes, where it's again it a lot of it felt like it just wanted to shift you to that uncomfortable feeling again, where it's like, okay, you're in the moment, and then like it just kind of throws you off with this out of nowhere inappropriate comment.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that those purposeful shifts that I'm calling jarring are probably done to create this atmosphere of the game that you shouldn't expect one thing. Things are going to change very rapidly on this island, and I think that does happen. What were some of your strengths or weaknesses about the game? Like, what did you really like? What did you find didn't really work out or kind of missed for you?
One of the things I liked is that you can really control how you want to play through the difficulty settings. So if you're kind of in it for the visual novel aspect and you just like to go through the story, the easiest difficulty will remove the enemies from the dungeons, so you're literally just walking around empty dungeons. and then the boss fight is like you basically just hit it once and the boss is defeated. Then you can move right up to, if the survival portion is what you're enjoying, then you can turn the enemies up to full blast, where they're just like every enemy is difficult and you're always having to worry about all your meters. And the other good thing about that is you don't have to choose that at the beginning. Like, you can change on the fly. So it can really satisfy whatever mood you're into. Like, if you just wanted to get through a couple dungeons to progress the story a bit, you can. Or if you're just in the mood for really getting into a good grind, it allows you to do that.
Yeah, a lot of games like this, you find that it's choose your difficulty at the very beginning of the game, and then you're stuck with that. And if you try to change it, if you want to change it midway through the game, you can only do that once, and then you're stuck on that one. You know, Etrian Odyssey did that to me. Etrian Odyssey Nexus I was playing a couple months ago, and I had it on medium, or one of the medium difficulties. And as soon as you switch it to the easier one, you're stuck there, and you cannot go back. And then everything became too easy. And I'm like, I don't really want to continue with this. So I like when games give you that option to kind of move back and forth, test out the different difficulties. It's nice in this one, if you put it on a harder difficulty, you get more rewards. I think you get more experience, more points added to your score, which lets you revive people. You find more items in the world. I think there's other things like that kind of reward you for playing on a harder difficulty as well.
What I think is going to turn off a lot of people is some of the subject matter. They do get into some taboo things. There's storylines that revolve around like incest and child abuse and things that are just going to turn people off. There's one character that's doing like a Nazi salute. There's just weird little things that is... Again, like I think the intention is to keep, again, just going back to the theme of keeping you uncomfortable. So they really push the boundaries of what's offensive. I don't feel like they cross the line at any point, especially the further you get in, because you really get the feeling of the context behind everything. So it's, by the end, it doesn't feel unnecessary, but in the moment, there's gonna be people that are just like, no, this is too far. So you really have to understand going in that there might be subject matter that many are going to find offensive.
Yeah, anyone who's familiar with Spike Chunsoft games like the Danganronpa series, they do the same thing. There's a lot of taboo subjects played off for comedy or for jokes, or again, to make you uncomfortable, to suggest these characters had traumatic experiences that are part of what's happening in the game now. The nice thing about it is that the taboo subjects are introduced, but they're not graphic. They don't go into a ton of detail. So it's more like, yes, there was child abuse here, or there was some I say some incest, like it's a light topic or something, but they don't really go very far with it. They're like, this was happening, or they allude to it happening, but then they kind of move on quickly to the next thing. And so it is, you're not spending a lot of time with that subject matter. It's just, it's there, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's part, like the crux of the game or something like that.
And much of it is implied as opposed to like shown to you.
Absolutely.
And then there's a character that makes light of a lot of the traumatic experiences, so it's, you can start to feel bad for the character and what they're going through, and then all of a sudden there's like a sexual innuendo joke to again just to kind of hit you while you're down. Yeah,
so that kind of sets me up for probably my number one strength of the game, or thing that I really liked, was there's these two characters, Sho and Mirai, and they show up on these TV sets that appear in the dungeon. They kind of tell you the backstory of that character that's the focus of the dungeon. Maybe we're talking about the character that you start with, Hiruto, I think his name is. And so you get his backstory told through these vignettes from Sho and Mirai. But Sho and Mirai, they're kind of, it shows like a younger kid, maybe 10, 11 years old or something, and Mirai is a sheep. Their interactions are really funny. I thought that those two characters, whenever I saw them, I knew something lighthearted was coming up, and those parts are definitely just played for comedy, and I really enjoyed their dialogue. The voice acting was really good with them as well. Their parts are completely voice acted, as opposed to some of a lot of the character interaction that you get with the protagonists, I should say. Not a lot of their dialogue is voiced, so I would have liked to have seen more of that. I guess that's maybe one of the weaknesses of the game. But the Sho and Mirai characters, I really like their dynamic and the videos that they showed, and those were, at times when you were just getting story or background about the characters. So I really liked whenever I found one of those TV sets and it would turn on, I knew I was advancing the story and I was going to learn more about each of the characters, but you also get to see the funny interaction between Sho and Mirai. So that was definitely one of my highlights.
Would you recommend this game?
Yeah, I think I would. I think you have to be the type of person who likes visual novel type games, or games that have that heavy story element where you want to get to the end and see how it plays out. It is a little bit darker. If you like the Danganronpa games, I think you will like this one. It's not a whodunit where you're solving murder mysteries or anything like that, and there's no courtroom scenes like there is in Danganronpa, but there is the same kind of dark sense of humor and characters that you kind of become attached to, and a very interesting story kind of at the heart of it, all around this apocalypse, or this this world-ending event that's taken place. So definitely recommend it to fans of the Danganronpa series. I think people in general that kind of like survival dungeon type games, or RPGs with good stories, I think this has a good story, and like I said, characters that are endearing, and I want to see what happens to them. So I think I would overall recommend the game to a lot of fans of these types. What about you, David? Yeah.
I would recommend it as well. It's a fun playthrough. I enjoyed, again, the major draw for me was the visual novel part, but I really enjoyed the dungeon crawling too. The majority of it, like you said, because the dungeons are kind of that grid-based, it was wearing on me near the end, but the visual novel kept me motivated. So, if you're kind of a fan of, like you said, that the survival game, if you like the dungeon crawling, then it's and it's got the story is very well, like it was interesting throughout. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would recommend that.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough game. About the halfway point, or 3/4 of the game, it does get really challenging. I think the dungeons get longer, the enemies hit harder. You need to craft better equipment. But if you get to that point and you feel like you just want to see how the story ends, again, you can flip down to a lower difficulty and just get through it and see how the story goes. So, definitely recommend. I would recommend this one for sure.
But we better just wrap it up with, maybe you could give us what you feel the score is.
So if I was going, 20-point scale, so I'm thinking probably around the 7.5 mark. Kind of in general, if you're a fan of Danganronpa, maybe higher to maybe push to an 8 or something like that. So I'm around a 7.5, 8. Kind of still grappling with that, I would say.
Yeah. Out of 10.
Yeah, 7.5 or 8 out of 10. That's right.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the review, please like and subscribe below. You can also check out our website, www.thethirstymage.com, or you can follow us on Twitter under the handle TheThirstyMage.